wardrobe, we're going to be looking at Peter's first battle. So let's dig into that. Hopefully the internet will settle down a little bit. It's kind of weird stuff on me. See, while the dwarf and the white witch were saying this miles away, the beavers and the children were walking on hour after hour into what seemed like a delicious dream. Long ago they had left the coats behind them, and now they had even stopped saying one to another, "Look, there's a kingfisher. Oh, I see bluebells." Or what about that lovely smell? Just listen to that thrush. As they walked on in silence, drinking it all in, passing through patches of warm sunlight into cool green thickets and out again into wide mossy glades, where tall elms raised their leafy roof far overhead, and then into dense masses of flowering currant and among hawthorn bushes where the sweet smell was almost overpowering. They had been just as surprised as Edmund when they saw their winter vanishing and the whole wood passing in a few hours or so from January to May. They hadn't even known for certain, as the witch did, that this is what was happening when Aslan came to Narnia. But they all knew that it was her spells that had produced the endless winter. Therefore, they all knew this magic spring had to be something had began that the magic spring began. Let me start there. They all knew when this magic spring began that something had gone wrong, and badly wrong, with the witch's schemes. And after the thaw had been going on for some time, they all realized that the witch would no longer be able to use her sleigh. And after that, they didn't hurry as much, and they allowed themselves more rests and longer ones. And they were pretty tired by now, of course, but not what I'd call bitterly tired, or only slow and feeling very dreamy and quiet inside as one does when one is coming to the end of a long day in the open. Susan had a slight blister on one heel. They had left the course of the big river some time ago, for one had to turn a little to the right, which meant a little to the south, to reach the place of the stone table. Even if this had not been their way, they couldn't have kept to the river valley only once the thaw began, for with all that melting snow, the river soon was in flood, a wonderful, roaring, thundering yellow flood, and their path would have been under water. And now the sun got low, and the light got redder, and the shadows got longer, and the flowers began to think about closing. "Not long now," said Mr. Beaver, and began leading them uphill across some deep, springy moss. It felt nice under their feet, in a place where only tall trees grew very wide apart. The climb coming to an end of a long day made them all pant and blow, and just as Lucy was wondering whether she could really get to the top without another long rest, suddenly they were at the top, and this was what they saw. There was a green open space from which they could look down on a forest spreading as far as they could see in every direction, except right ahead. There, far to the east, was something twinkling and moving. "By gum," whispered Peter to Susan, "the sea!" And in the very middle of this open hilltop was the stone table. It was a great grim slab of gray stone supported on 4 upright stones. It looked very old, and it was cut all over the place with strange lines and figures that might be letters of an unknown language. They gave you a curious feeling when you looked at them. The next thing they saw was a pavilion pitched to one side in an open place. A wonderful pavilion it was, especially now that the light of the setting sun fell upon it, with sides of what looked like yellow silk and cords of crimson and tent pegs of ivory, and high above it on a pole banner which bore a red rampant lion fluttering in the breeze, which was blowing in the faces from the far off sea. While they were looking at this, they heard a sound of music on the right, and they turned in that direction and saw what they had come to see. Aslan stood in the center of a crowd of creatures who had grouped themselves around him in the shape of a half moon. There were tree women and well women, dryads and naiads, as they used to be called in our world, who had stringed instruments, and it was they who had made the music. And there were 4 great centaurs, and a horse part of them was like a huge English farm horse, and the man part was like a stern but beautiful giant. There was also a unicorn and a bull with the head of a man, and a pelican and an eagle and a great dog. And next to Aslan stood 2 leopards, one of whom one carried his crown and the other his standard. But as for Aslan himself, the beaver and the children didn't know what to do or to say when they saw him. The people who have not been in Narnia sometimes think that a thing cannot be good and terrible at the same time. If the children had ever thought so, they were cured of it now, for when they tried to look at Aslan's face, they just caught a glimpse of a gold mane and a great royal, solemn, overwhelming eyes, and they found they couldn't look at him. And went all trembly. Go on, whispered Mr. Beaver. No, whispered Peter, you first. No, sons of Adam, before animals, whispered Mr. Beaver back again. They're both a little scared of going. Here's a picture of the group around Aslan. Quite a group of creatures there. Susan, whispered Peter, what about you? Ladies first. Nope, you're the oldest, whispered Susan, and of course the longer they went on doing this, the more awkward they felt. Then at last Peter realized it was up to him. He drew his sword and raised it in a salute, and hastily saying to the others, come on, pull yourselves together, and advanced to the lion and said, we have come, Aslan. Welcome, Peter, son of Adam, said Aslan. Welcome, Susan and Lucy, daughters of Eve. Welcome, he-beaver and she-beaver. His voice was deep and rich and somehow took the fidget out of them. They now felt glad and quiet and didn't seem awkward to them to stand and say nothing. But where's the fourth? Asked Aslan. He has tried to betray them and joined the White Witch, O Aslan, said Mr. Beaver. And then something made Peter say, it was partly my fault, Aslan. I was angry with him, and I think that helped him to go wrong. And Aslan said nothing, either to excuse Peter or to blame him, but merely stood looking at him with his great unchanging eyes. And it seemed to all of them that there was nothing to be said. Please, Aslan, said Lucy, can anything be done to save Edmund? All shall be done, said Aslan, but it may be harder than you think. And when he was silent again for some time, up to that moment, Lucy had been thinking how royal and strong and peaceful his face looked. Now, it suddenly came to her head that he looked sad as well, but the next minute that expression was quite gone. The lion shook his mane and clapped his paws together. Terrible paws, thought Lucy. If he didn't know how to velvet them, she said. Meanwhile, let the feast be prepared. Ladies, take these daughters of Eve to the pavilion and minister to them. When the girls had gone, Aslan laid his paw, and though it was velveted, it was very heavy on Peter's shoulder, and said, come, son of Adam, I will show you a far-off sight of a castle where you are to be king. And Peter, with his sword still drawn in his hand, went with the lion to the edge of the hilltop, and a beautiful sight met his eyes. The sun was setting behind their backs, and that meant that the whole country below them lay in evening light. Forest and hills and valley, winding away like a silver snake, the lower part of the great river. And beyond all this, miles away, was the sea. Beyond the sea, the sky full of clouds, which were they just turning the rose color with the reflection of the sunset, but just where the land of Narnia met the sea. In fact, at the mouth of the great river, there was something on a little hill shining. And it was shining because it was a castle, and of course the sunlight reflected from all the windows which looked toward Peter in the sunset. But to Peter, it looked like a great star resting on a seashore. That, O man, said Aslan, is Cair Paravel of the four thrones, in one of which you must sit as king. I show it to you because you are the firstborn, and you will be high king over all the rest. And once more Peter said nothing, for at that moment a strange noise woke the silence suddenly, and it was like a bugle but richer. It is your sister's horn, said Aslan to Peter in a low voice, so low it was almost a purr, if it was not disrespectful to think of a lion purring. For a moment Peter did not understand. Then when he saw all the other creatures start forward and heard Aslan say with a wave of his paw, back, little prince, back, let the prince win his spurs. He did understand. Let me start that again. Back, let the prince win his spurs. He did understand and set off running as hard as he could to the pavilion. And there he saw a dreadful sight. The naiads and the dryads were scattered in every direction. Lucy was running toward him as fast as her short legs could carry her, and her face was white as paper. Then he saw Susan make a dash for the tree and swing herself up, followed by a huge gray beast. At first Peter thought it was a bear. Then he saw it look like an Elastian, and thought, though it was far too big to be a dog. Then he realized it was a wolf standing on its hind legs with his front paws against the tree trunk, snapping and snarling. All the hair on its back stood up on end. Susan had not been able to get higher than the second branch. One of her legs hung down so that her foot was only an inch or two above the snapping teeth. Peter wondered why she did not get higher, or at least take a better grip. Then he realized she was going to faint, and that if she fainted, she would fall off. Peter did not feel brave. Indeed, he felt like he was going to be sick, but that made no difference to what he had to do. He rushed straight up to the monster, aimed a slash of his sword at its side, and the stroke never reached the wolf. Quick as lightning, it turned round, its eyes flaming, its mouth wide open in a howl of anger. If it had not been so angry that it simply had to howl, it would have gotten him by the throat at once. As it was, though, all that happened too quickly for Peter to think at all. He just had time to duck down and plunge the sword as hard as he could between the brute's forelegs into its heart. Then came a horrible, confused moment, like something in a nightmare. He was tugging and pulling, and the wolf seemed neither alive nor dead. Its bared teeth knocked against his forehead, and everything was blood and heat and hair. And a moment later he found that the monster lay dead, and he had drawn his sword out of it and was straightening his back and rubbing the sweat off of his face and out of his eyes. He felt tired all over. Then after a bit, Susan came down the tree. She and Peter felt pretty shaky when they met, and I won't say there wasn't kissing and crying on both sides, but in Narnia no one thinks any the worse of you for that. Quick, quick, shouted the voice of Aslan. Centaurs, eagles, I see another wolf in the thicket there behind you. He was just darting away after him, all of you. He will be going to his mistress. Now is your chance to find the witch and rescue the fourth son of Adam. And instantly there was a thunder of hooves, beating of wings, and a dozen or so of the swiftest creatures disappeared into the gathering darkness. Peter, still out of breath, turned and saw Aslan close at hand. You have forgotten to clean your sword, said Aslan. It was true. He blushed when he looked at the bright blade and saw it all smeared with wolf's hair and blood, and he stooped down and wiped it clean on the grass, and then wiped it quite dry on his coat. Hand it to me and kneel, son of Adam, and said Aslan. And when Peter was done, he struck him with the flat of the blade and said, Rise up, Sir Peter Wolfbane, and whatever happens, never forget to wipe your sword. So the next chapter, chapter 13, is Deep Magic from the Dawn of Time. That's going to be interesting. Deep magic from the dawn of time. Mighty Father, I thank you for young Christopher. Pray that you'd bless him, be with him as school begins to wind down. Help it to be a great year for him, learning and growing. Be with Mr. Oliver as he learns and grows. I know he's not in school yet, but there's so much that he's picking up and learning. Be with Miss Celeste and Mr. Stephen. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, God bless you. I love you. Have a great night.